I never thought a child's whisper could make the whole world stop, but when my grandson tugged my sleeve and said, "Grandpa, don't eat the cake," everything inside me froze. The dining room glowed with a golden warmth. The roasted chicken still lingered in the air, its rich scent mixing with the faint sweetness of frosting. Glasses clinked, forks scraped, and the hum of laughter wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. For a moment, I thought life had slowed, that maybe the shadows of age were giving me one final, peaceful evening. But then came the tug. "Grandpa," my grandson whispered, his little fingers curling into the fabric of my sleeve. His eyes, those big, round eyes, were locked on the cake in front of me. "Don't eat it." At first I chuckled. "Why not?" I teased, ruffling his hair. "You don't want me stealing the first bite, But his face didn't change. No smile, no giggle. Just that stiff, trembling seriousness a child shouldn't know. His lips quivered as if holding back tears. Across the table, Mark cleared his throat. My son-in-law leaned forward, knife in hand, and began slicing the cake. The steel scraped against the porcelain plate with a sharp screech that sent a shiver down my spine. He looked up, and his lips curled into a polite smile. Too polite, too stiff. "You're the guest of honor tonight," he said smoothly, though his jaw twitched like he was grinding his teeth. "You take the first piece." I forced a smile. "That's kind of you, Mark." But something in the air had shifted. The laughter seemed forced now, the room colder despite the crackling fire in the corner. My daughter fiddled with her napkin, her eyes darting from me to Mark, then quickly away. The faint ticking of the grandfather clock on the wall grew louder, almost deafening. I leaned closer to my grandson. "Why shouldn't I eat it, boy?" I whispered. He shook his head violently, his small hands clutching tighter. "Just don't." His voice was so soft I barely heard it, yet it struck me like a hammer. I stared at him, my chest tightening. Children didn't lie like that, not with eyes wide in fear. "Everything all right?" Mark's voice cut through the tension, smooth as honey but cold underneath. He handed me the plate, the slice of cake resting there with its thick white frosting and cherries glistening like blood spots. I hesitated. My fork hovered in the air. "Dad?" My daughter's voice trembled slightly. "Go on, try it." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The air smelled wrong now. Sweet, yes, but underneath, faintly bitter. Metallic, almost. My mind flicked back to my wife's stories. Her father had been a farmer, once warning her that certain poisons smelled faintly of almonds. I shook my head. "Nonsense. It's just a cake." Mark's eyes met mine. His smile widened. Too wide. "You've got to try it, sir," he pressed. "The recipe is special. We made it just for you." His words were polite, but his tone wasn't a request. It was a command. I looked back at my grandson. He shook his head so hard his cheeks flushed red. "Go on, Grandpa," Mark repeated, pushing the plate closer. His knuckles were white around the knife handle. The room had fallen silent. Even the fire seemed to have dimmed. I could hear only my own heartbeat, thundering in my ears. I glanced around the table. Robert, my brother, smirked as he swirled his wine glass. He didn't say a word, but the way he leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting with amusement, made my stomach knot. "Don't be rude," Robert finally said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Eat. Everyone's waiting." My throat went dry. I pressed the fork into the cake, breaking the frosting. The sound, soft, almost like fabric tearing, echoed too loudly in the silence. My hand shook as I lifted it. I looked at my grandson one last time. His lips formed the words again, soundless this time, "Don't eat it." For a brief moment, I thought about putting the fork down. But all eyes were on me, waiting, pressing. My pride fought against the chill creeping up my spine. Slowly, I raised the fork toward my mouth. The sweet smell of frosting mixed with something else, something sharper, something wrong. And that's when I saw it. Mark, still holding the knife, staring at me. His face calm, his smile steady. But his eyes, they weren't smiling at all. They were sharp, hungry, glinting with something I couldn't name. His grin stretched too far, showing just a hint of teeth, like a predator watching its prey. The fork trembled an inch from my lips. I froze. And in that single, suffocating second, I realized Mark wasn't watching me eat. He was waiting for me to die. The cake melted on my tongue, sweet at first, but with a bitter aftertaste that sent a jolt through me. I forced a smile as forks clinked and laughter rippled around the table. My family cheered, raising their glasses, but inside, a shadow coiled. The sweetness didn't linger. It curdled, sharp and metallic, coating the back of my throat. I coughed lightly, covering my mouth with a napkin. "Dad?" my daughter asked, her voice too bright. "You okay?" I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. "Don't make a scene, not yet." The taste reminded me of biting my lip too hard, iron against my teeth. And then, almonds, faint, but distinct. That smell, that warning. My late wife's voice ghosted through my mind. If you ever taste almonds where they don't belong, be careful. It can mean poison. I glanced at my plate. Just cake. Ordinary. Yet my stomach twisted. From across the table, my grandson's wide eyes fixed on me. He leaned close, barely whispering. "I told you." My fork froze midair. "What?" I whispered back, keeping my lips still, barely moving. He shook his head, fear trembling in his small shoulders. "Nothing." Mark chuckled too loudly, leaning back in his chair. "Guess the baker got creative with the recipe, huh?" His forced laugh cracked at the edges, like glass under pressure. His smile didn't touch his eyes. I watched his fingers drum against the table, 3 quick taps, then a pause, then again. Nervous. Calculated. "Dad, don't scare us," my daughter said, still laughing, but her glance toward Mark was quick, sharp, almost pleading. My throat tightened. Was it paranoia, or design? "Everything tastes fine to me," I said slowly, letting the words hang. My eyes swept the table. "Doesn't it to you?" Mark raised his fork, exaggerated, shoving a bite into his mouth. "Delicious," he said with a smirk. Crumbs clung to his lips. "See?" But he chewed too quickly, swallowed too hard. I caught it. The room's air grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were leaning in. Every laugh, every clink, felt rehearsed. A performance, and I was the only one not in on the script. "You're pale," my grandson whispered. His small hand clutched mine under the table, clammy and desperate. "Don't eat more." My daughter noticed, her voice suddenly sharp. "Sweetheart, stop making things up." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, pressing closer to me. I studied her, her smile stretched too wide, her breathing shallow. Her eyes darted between me and Mark. "What's wrong with him?" Mark asked, tone dripping with mock concern. "Maybe age catching up, Heat rose in my chest. My heart hammered. Was I imagining this? Or was I watching the edges of a trap unfold around me? The almond scent grew stronger, mingling with frosting's sugar and the faint musk of melted candles. The chandelier's light flickered, and for a moment, Mark's face looked hollowed, predatory in shadow. The metallic tang refused to leave my tongue. I need water," I said finally, pushing my chair back. My daughter stood too fast. "I'll get it." "No." My voice was sharper than I intended. Her body froze mid-step. "I'll get it myself." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every eye turned toward me, their smiles brittle. My skin prickled, as though I had stepped into a stranger's house, not my own. Mark broke it. "You think we'd harm you?" His voice low, smooth, a snake in tall grass. I didn't answer. "You look at me like I'm some villain in a play," he continued, his grin returning. "But maybe you're just paranoid. Isn't that right?" My daughter forced a laugh. "Dad, don't listen. He's joking." But her fingers twisted the edge of her napkin until it nearly tore. "Am I?" Mark's eyes locked on mine. He leaned forward. "Tell me, old man, what exactly do you taste?" The room was too quiet. I heard only the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock. "Something bitter," I said finally, meeting his gaze. "Something that doesn't belong." Mark's smile faltered. For a fraction of a second I saw it, the flicker of something cold, something real beneath the mask. His jaw tightened, and the tapping stopped. And in that silence, in that stillness, I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't age. This wasn't paranoia. Something had been planned, and everyone here was waiting to see if I'd survived the night. I had survived war, loss, and betrayal, but nothing rattled me like the sound of my grandson crying in secret that night. His muffled sobs leaked through the paper-thin walls of the old house. Not loud, not theatrical, quiet, broken sounds that a child makes when he doesn't want to be heard. The kind of crying that eats at you because it's soaked in fear, not pain. I slipped out of bed, my joints aching, and padded across the hallway in my socks. The floorboards creaked like tattletales. I paused, listening. The voices came first, low, tense, like someone trying to keep secrets from the dark itself. "He wasn't supposed to." Mark, his voice tight, pressed in. What if the kid ruins it? Robert, my brother, my blood. I froze, leaning against the cool plaster wall near the kitchen arch. The faint smell of whiskey clung to the air, sharp and oily. My stomach nodded. You're getting sloppy, Robert hissed. One bite, and he almost knew. Mark's reply cracked, almost a growl. He didn't know. He only suspects. Old men suspect everything. That's what age does to them. A pause, a clink of glass, ice against crystal. And the boy? Robert's whisper slithered. He sees too much. Then we make sure he forgets. Mark's tone was colder this time. The glass hit the counter, hard. I pressed myself flatter against the wall, my breath shallow. My chest tightened, not from age this time, but from dread. He wasn't supposed to, what? Suspect? Die. The thought seared into me. My own brother. My own son-in-law. Two men who had shared my table, my trust, my family. Their whispers weren't harmless. They were knives in the dark, carving out secrets I was never meant to hear. And then I thought of my grandson. His wide eyes at dinner. His trembling whisper, I told you. He wasn't lying. He was warning me. The kitchen light was dim, just the yellow hum of the fridge casting shapes onto the linoleum. Shadows flickered when Robert shifted. I caught a glimpse of his silhouette, broad, still strong, shoulders hunched like a predator waiting for movement. Mark paced. I could hear it. The soft thud of his shoes against the worn floor. Quick steps, then a stop. Quick steps again. That restless energy of a man caged by his own nerves. Robert's voice sharpened. If he talks, he won't. Mark snapped. He's too old to matter. And if he tries, the silence that followed was worse than words. I wanted to burst in, to demand answers, but my body held me still. Fear is strange like that. It locks you in place even when rage burns in your veins. The sound of a door creaking upstairs broke the tension. Tiny feet scurried across the floor above. Then the crying again, muffled but unmistakable. My grandson. I slipped away before they noticed, climbing the stairs as quietly as I could. My hand trembled on the banister. His door was cracked. I pushed it gently. He sat on the bed, clutching his stuffed bear, eyes red and swollen. When he saw me, he scrambled into my arms without hesitation. His little body shook like a leaf in a storm. They don't like you, Grandpa, he whispered into my shirt. His voice cracked. They want you gone. I held him tighter, my throat raw. Who told you that? He shook his head, refusing to meet my eyes. I heard them. I hear them all the time. Robert, my brother. Always sly, always scheming, but I had never thought he would go this far. Mark, though, my son-in-law, I had trusted him. Trusted him with my daughter, my grandson. Trusted him like a son. Why now? Why tonight? The answers churned just out of reach, like shadows in fog. But the boy's fear was real, and I knew enough to stop doubting myself. I tucked him back under the covers, smoothing his hair as his sobs faded into hiccups. I promised him, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself, that I'd keep him safe. That's when I saw it. A small folded note, slipped halfway under my bedroom door across the hall. I froze, my pulse slamming in my ears. I picked it up with shaking hands. 3 words. Written in shaky letters. I thought betrayal was something you outlive, but the past has a way of sharpening its claws when you least expect it. The note sat heavy in my pocket all night. Don't trust them. 3 words. No signature. But the handwriting, it wasn't Mark's, and it wasn't Robert's either. Too shaky, too rushed. Sleep never came. Instead, memories came crawling back, like old wounds tearing open. Robert, my brother. Always the shadow at my shoulder. The bitter smell of tobacco burned my nostrils, a ghost from 20 years ago. I could see him clear as day, standing in Father's study, his hands full of coins that weren't his. I had caught him red-handed, the firelight painting his face in guilt and fury. You think the land should be yours? I'd said back then, voice low, trembling with anger. It was supposed to be mine. He spat, eyes wild. You were always the favorite. Always the chosen one. His jealousy had never healed. In fact, it had festered, thick and poisonous. And now it was bleeding into my house, my family. But Mark, that cut deeper. He wasn't blood, yet I had treated him as such. I trusted him to protect my daughter, my grandson. Trusting him now felt like a cruel joke I'd played on myself. By morning, my hands still shook when I poured my coffee. The kitchen smelled of butter and fried eggs, but the tension in the air was thicker than smoke. I sat down at the table. Mark sat across from me, his shoulders hunched, jaw tight. Robert leaned back, relaxed in a way that screamed performance. He smiled too easily, lips curling with that smug tilt I knew too well. My grandson sat beside me, his small hands folded in his lap, eyes glued to his plate. He didn't eat. He didn't even move. I cleared my throat, forcing casualness I didn't feel. Strange thing, I said, picking up my fork. That cake last night had a bitter aftertaste, didn't it? Robert's smirk twitched at the corners. Did it? He asked, feigning surprise. He lifted his coffee cup, swirling it like wine. Didn't notice. Mark coughed suddenly, the sound sharp, strained. He dabbed at his mouth with a napkin, avoiding my eyes. I let my gaze linger on him. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass of water. My grandson shifted, pushing eggs around his plate. Silent, but his jaw clenched, tight as a drum. Robert chuckled softly. Maybe you're just getting old. Your taste buds aren't what they used to be, brother. The word brother dripped from his tongue like venom. That single smirk told me everything. He knew. He wanted me to know he knew. But Mark, his cough, his twitching fingers, he was unraveling. Robert was the puppeteer. Mark was the marionette, jerking under invisible strings. And my grandson? He was the unwilling witness, already carrying a weight no child should. I clenched my fork so hard it nearly bent. The clock on the wall ticked too loud, slicing the silence. The smell of bacon had turned sour to me, oily and cloying. Even the sunlight felt wrong, too bright, as if it was mocking the shadows gathering inside this house. I forced myself to eat, though every bite tasted like ash. Robert leaned forward, eyes gleaming. So tell me, brother, do you ever regret it? I stiffened. Regret what? He smiled thinly. Taking what was mine. The land, the house, the life, everything. Mark shifted in his chair, clearing his throat again, but said nothing. My grandson's fork clattered against his plate, his little fist curled tight. He whispered, barely audible. Stop it! Robert turned his gaze on the boy, the smile never leaving his lips. What's that, lad? Didn't hear you. The boy looked down, trembling. I slid my hand over his, steadying him. My pulse hammered. That's enough, I said, voice low. Robert leaned back again, satisfied. He had struck where he wanted. I excused myself before the storm inside me broke. My legs carried me down the hall to my study, each step heavier than the last. I needed air. I needed clarity. The study was dim, curtains half drawn. My hand reached for the familiar comfort of my desk, but then I froze. Something glittered on the floor near the rug. I bent down. My fingers brushed cold metal. My wife's old bracelet, shattered. The one she had worn the night before she died. Beside it, fresh footprints, muddy, unmistakable, leading away from my study door. My throat closed. My past wasn't just resurfacing. It was clawing its way back into my home. And someone wanted me to follow the trail. The bracelet wasn't just jewelry. It was the last piece of her I had left, and now it was broken. The cold metal bit into my palm as I squeezed it tight. Each jagged edge pressed against my skin, sharper than it should have been. My wife's bracelet, her final gift, her last touch on this earth. And now, lying shattered on my study floor like some discarded trinket. My throat burned. Anger rose like bile, hot and corrosive, and my chest ached with the effort of holding it down. Robert knew. He had always known what this meant to me. If this was his doing, it wasn't just a message, it was war. Grandpa? The voice was small, barely audible above the ticking of the grandfather clock. I spun around, shoving the broken bracelet into my pocket before my grandson could see. He stood at the door, eyes wide, shoulders hunched like he carried a weight too big for him. What is it, lad? I whispered, forcing calm. He glanced down the hall before stepping closer. His voice dropped lower, like he was afraid the walls might listen. I saw him, he said. Uncle Mark. He went into your study earlier. He was looking at your desk. He looked scared when he left. My heart cracked. Mark. Again. The cough at breakfast. The trembling hand. Now this. You're sure? I asked, gripping the boy's shoulder gently. He nodded fast, his bottom lip trembling. I promise. I wouldn't lie, Grandpa. I pulled him close, hand trembling on the back of his head. He was just a child, dragged into shadows he couldn't escape. I wanted to tell him everything was fine. That Mark wasn't a danger. That Robert's games couldn't touch us. But the words tasted false. First poison. now desecration. Mark wasn't innocent, not anymore. My own blind trust had turned into a noose tightening around my neck. The study smelled faintly of damp earth, the muddy footprints still etched into the floorboards. They weren't random. They were deliberate. A message left for me to find. By the time evening came, the house felt different. Every corner too dark, every creak too loud. The faint aroma of supper hung in the air, but it didn't comfort me. It clung, heavy and greasy, like smoke. I feigned exhaustion, letting my body sink into the mattress, covers pulled high. My eyes shut, but I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. The clock in the hallway ticked in rhythm with my pulse. 1, 2, 3. Every beat a reminder of how fragile the walls of this house had become. Through the crack beneath my bedroom door, light shifted. Shadows moved. I slowed my breathing, forcing it steady. Then voices. Whispers, low and sharp, rising and falling like a secret tide. I recognized them instantly. Robert, Mark. Their tones were hushed but urgent, like thieves planning a break-in. Robert's voice first smooth, almost amused. Tomorrow. That's when we do it. Mark's reply was a harsh whisper. And if he suspects? He already suspects, Robert said, a chuckle under his breath. That's the beauty of it. Suspicion eats a man alive. He'll be too distracted to stop us. Mark hesitated, then asked, "What about the boy?" The silence that followed nearly split me open. Robert finally answered, voice low, dangerous. "The boy is leverage. He'll keep the old man obedient if needed." My fists balled under the blanket. The urge to storm out, to drag them into the light, nearly consumed me. But I stayed still. Their whispers turned to muffled laughter. Soft. Cruel. I pictured Robert's smirk, the way he leaned too close when he wanted dominance. I could almost see Mark's nervous pacing, hand rubbing the back of his neck, torn between loyalty and fear. They thought they were safe in the dark. They thought I was asleep. But every syllable carved deeper into me, branding me with a truth I could no longer deny. The air in my room grew heavier, hot despite the cool night. The faint smell of tobacco drifted through the hallway crack, the same bitter stench from years ago when I caught Robert stealing. The floorboards creaked as their shadows shifted again. A door clicked shut somewhere down the hall. Then silence. Only the steady, merciless tick of the grandfather clock remained. I opened my eyes to the dark ceiling above. Their plan wasn't just about me. It was about everything I had built, and tomorrow they would make their move. It's one thing to suspect betrayal. It's another to hear your own blood speak it out loud. The pantry was never meant to be a hiding place. Just a cramped wooden box, shelves lined with flour jars and stale crackers, a single bulb humming above me. But that night, it became my confessional. The air was musty, thick with dust, and the faint smell of coffee grounds spilling from a broken bag. My heart beat loud enough. I swore it could rattle the jars. I pressed my ear to the thin paneling. Their voices carried from the kitchen. Robert's laugh came first, low, confident, almost rehearsed. "Dad doesn't even notice when I take the mail anymore," he said. "The old man's slipping. It's pathetic, really." Mark's voice followed, quieter, but sharp with agreement. "Exactly. Once he starts forgetting names, it'll be easy to prove he's not fit to live alone. We'll call it dementia, get a doctor to sign off. Then the house, everything, falls into our hands." My stomach dropped. For months, I'd caught whispers, side glances, papers tucked away when I entered the room. But hearing them now, hearing my sons, turned suspicion into a wound. My fingers trembled against the wood. Not from weakness, not from age, but from rage. Robert went on. "The cake was just a test, Mark. You saw it, didn't you? He didn't even argue when we joked about his birthday. He just sat there, quiet, like he already knew he was losing it." Mark chuckled. "He won't last a year." I bit my tongue until iron filled my mouth. The cake, my own birthday cake, hadn't been a celebration at all. It had been an experiment. They weren't checking on me. They were measuring how much of me was left to destroy. Through the sliver of light, I saw my grandson move. Little Thomas. Barely tall enough to reach the counter, yet sharp enough to sense danger. He turned his head and caught my eye. For a moment, panic froze me. Had he seen me hiding? Would he call out? But no. He held my gaze. His lips pressed tight, his brows drawn, that defiant spark flashing across his small face. Not fear, not confusion, but something I hadn't seen in anyone else in this family for months, loyalty. Mark leaned back in his chair. I heard the scrape of wood against tile. So what's the timeline? A month? 2? Robert exhaled, smug. No rush. We make it slow. Convince him he's losing touch. Misplace his keys, move his glasses, plant a little paranoia. When he snaps, we'll have proof. Everyone will think he's gone senile. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. They wanted to erase me while I was still alive, turn me into a ghost in my own home. Thomas shuffled closer, deliberately noisy now, covering my presence. He reached for the cookie jar, fingers fumbling the lid. Robert glanced over but dismissed him with a wave. Kid's nosy, Robert muttered. Better keep him out of this. Better keep him out of this. They didn't know. They couldn't know. The boy lifted the jar, set it down, and, without looking, angled his body just enough so his shoulder shielded me from view. His small act of rebellion hit harder than any betrayal. In that instant, I wasn't alone. I whispered, barely audible. Stay quiet, Tommy. He blinked, almost imperceptibly. A silent pact. The kitchen filled with the sound of ice clinking in glasses. Mark poured himself a drink. You sure Dad won't fight back? Robert snorted. Fight back? Look at him. He's already fading. By Christmas, he'll believe it himself. We'll just guide the fall. I wanted to burst through the door, slam the glasses from their hands, scream until the walls cracked. But I forced myself still. Their arrogance was my weapon. If I showed my hand now, they'd double down. Instead, I memorized every word, every sneer, every laugh. The bulb above me flickered once, twice, before steadying. The sound of Robert's laughter filled the air again, thick, triumphant, poisonous. And in that poison, I found clarity. I leaned closer to Thomas, my breath brushing his ear. It's time we make our own plan. Revenge doesn't come in rage. It comes in silence, in patience, in waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I learned quickly that anger had no place here. Rage would blow my cover, and they were watching me too closely now. So I gave them what they wanted, the trembling old man, fading into the corners of his own house. I shuffled slower across the hall, dragging my slippers against the wood. Each step creaked louder than the last, deliberate, exaggerated. When Robert glanced my way, I let my shoulders slump and fumbled with the buttons of my sweater. See? He muttered to Mark one afternoon. He's slipping. I kept my eyes down, fighting the smirk tugging at my mouth. At the lunch table, the steam from the soup rose in curls, thick with the scent of onions and something bitter underneath. My stomach nodded. I stirred the spoon slowly, pretending confusion, then raised it to my lips. The broth burned, not from heat but from the acrid taste of metal lingering beneath the salt. Eat up, Dad, Robert said too brightly. His smile was a performance, tight around the eyes, strained at the edges. I forced myself to swallow. My throat tightened, but I didn't gag. Not this time. I wanted him to see me eat, to believe I was too frail to notice. Later, when the house went quiet, Thomas crept into my room. He carried a slice of bread, wrapped in a napkin, his small hands trembling as though smuggling contraband. Grandpa, he whispered, don't eat what they give you. Take this instead. I looked at him, those wide eyes, brimming with a seriousness far too heavy for a boy his age. My chest ached, but I forced a chuckle. You're saving me, Tommy. A soldier in secret. He straightened his back, proud. We'll win, right? I placed a finger to my lips, then nodded. We couldn't let them hear. Every night, after the house settled, I wrote. A small notebook hidden under my mattress filled with details. Robert's tapping foot when he lied, Mark's habit of checking the locks twice, the way their voices dropped when they thought I was asleep. Each note was fuel. Each observation, a weapon. My daughter, Claire, began noticing my decline. She watched me fumble with forks, watched me stare too long at the wall before answering her. One evening, as she helped me into bed, her brow furrowed with worry. Dad, she whispered, brushing the hair from my forehead. Are you all right? You don't seem yourself lately. Before I could answer, Mark appeared in the doorway. His arms crossed, his face set in that calm mask he wore whenever he needed to control the room. He's fine, he said firmly, almost too quickly. Just tired. Let him rest. Claire hesitated, glancing back at me. I forced a weak smile, pretending gratitude. She left reluctantly, her eyes still filled with suspicion. When the door clicked shut, Mark lingered. He leaned against the frame, his eyes narrowing. You're not fooling anyone, old man, he murmured, his voice a knife just for me. Sooner or later, we'll make the call. You'll be tucked away in a home where no one will hear you complain. I let my hand shake as I pulled the blanket higher. Maybe you're right, I said softly, my voice quivering. Maybe I am tired. He smirked, satisfied, and walked away. But I saw it, the flicker in his jaw, the twitch of impatience. He wasn't sure. Doubt was already creeping in. That night, Thomas slipped into my room again. Why do you act weaker, Grandpa? Why don't you just tell Mom? I pulled him close, lowering my voice until it was barely more than breath. Because they'll bury me faster if I fight. We let them think I'm falling apart. That way, when they move, we'll already be ahead. His small hands clenched into fists. He didn't answer, but his eyes said everything. The days blurred together in an act I played with perfect precision. I dropped my cane loudly when Robert passed by. I stared too long at a newspaper headline as though the words had slipped away. I coughed into my hand until my ribs ached, each rasp echoing down the hall. And each time, they looked at one another, smirking, whispering, believing. But at night I wrote. I remembered. I sharpened the blade they couldn't see. The storm broke one evening at dinner. Claire set the table, her hands shaking. Robert poured the wine, his smile stretched too thin. Mark adjusted his tie even though we weren't going anywhere. I lifted my glass slowly, feigning hesitation, watching Robert closely. His hand lingered over the decanter just a moment too long. His thumb rubbed the rim of my glass as though sealing something invisible inside. He set it down in front of me with a flourish. Here you go, Dad. To your health. I looked at the glass. The surface rippled under the light, darker than it should have been. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. I raised my head and smiled. A small, deliberate smile. They didn't notice. Not yet. That night, as I watched Robert pour something into my glass, I smiled to myself. I was ready. Sometimes survival is about pretending to drown until your enemies jump in after you. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me across the dinner table, tasting the tension like copper in my mouth. Robert's forced cheerfulness grated against my nerves. Mark's calm, calculated smile never reached his eyes. Tonight they thought they were in control. Tonight, I would let them believe it. The glass in front of me shimmered under the chandelier. A careful mix, a test of my weakness, laced with something meant to push me over the edge. I picked it up slowly, letting the faint aroma of something bitter and metallic fill my nostrils. My stomach twisted. You don't have to force yourself, Claire murmured, worry lining her eyes. I smiled weakly, placing a hand over hers. I'm fine. Really. Robert leaned in, rubbing his thumb against the stem of my glass. Here, just one sip. Don't make a fuss, old man. We wouldn't want you to ruin dinner. I tipped the glass to my lips. The liquid burned, sharp, acrid, and wrong, but I swallowed. My throat constricted, my body trembling as though the poison had already begun its work. My hands shook violently, enough to make the glass wobble. Dad? Claire's voice cracked. My head pitched forward, letting it hit the cold wood of the table with a loud, satisfying thud. A sharp crack of pain radiated from my cheek, but I welcomed it. I let my body collapse onto the table, arms slack, chest heaving in ragged breaths, limbs sprawled as if the strength had drained from me completely. Chaos erupted. Claire screamed. Plates clattered to the floor. Robert's face paled, his forced smile gone, replaced by panic that made his hands tremble. Dad! What's happening? She shouted, flinging her hands toward me. Mark moved quickly, mask of control in place, trying to lift me upright. Step back, Claire! Give me some space! Their voices rose in frantic harmony, Robert cursing under his breath, Mark barking orders. And through it all, I stayed still, listening, breathing, watching. I felt the tremor of their panic, the uncertainty they thought they had hidden so well. Every whisper, every sharp intake of breath, every nervous glance was now mine to keep. And then I heard it, admission spilling out like venom. Robert muttering under his breath about getting everything before he notices. Mark laughing softly, too close to me, confirming the plans I had already suspected. They won't see it coming. He's too old, too weak. By next month, it's all ours, Robert hissed. Mark chuckled, leaning closer, not knowing I was listening. The care home will handle him. Cake test, worked like a charm. No suspicion at all. My grandson, Thomas, hidden under the table with his tablet, caught it all. Every word, every movement, every misstep. The soft tap of his fingers on the screen, the faint glow from the device, reminded me of the silent ally at my side. I let the pounding of my heart echo through the stillness, synchronizing with the fake pulse they were about to check. The crash of a plate, the gasp from Claire, the clatter of silverware, they were engraving the scene into my memory, into the evidence I needed. Mark leaned closer, squinting. He's barely moving. Did we go too far? Robert's hand hovered uncertainly, shaking just slightly. No, it's fine. He's old, that's all. Keep him upright, just don't let him choke. Their voices carried all the arrogance, all the overconfidence that comes from believing you have the upper hand. They didn't notice how limp I truly felt, not from weakness, but from purpose. Thomas whispered from under the table, almost inaudible. Grandpa, now? I exhaled slowly, letting the tiniest twitch in my fingers signal the moment was close. Mark's hands fumbled, checking my pulse at the wrist. His breath brushed against my skin. I could feel the tension in his body, the uncertainty he tried to hide. I opened one eye, letting him catch the glint of recognition. My lips parted. My voice was a low, soft whisper, almost drowned in the storm of noise. Got you. The effect was immediate. Mark jerked back, eyes wide, dropping my wrist like a live wire. Robert froze, his jaw slack, the realization spreading across his face. Claire let out a shaky gasp, unsure whether to cry or run. Thomas peeked from under the table, grinning despite himself. Did you see? You did it! I pushed up slowly, every movement deliberate, the weight of my body reminding them I had never truly been weak. My hand rested on the table, fingers splayed, and I let the room absorb the silence that followed, the shock, the fear, the dawning understanding that the predator they thought I was, had been the hunter all along. I looked at Robert and Mark, letting my eyes linger on their panicked faces. Every micro-expression, every twitch, every forced calm shattered now. They knew I had known everything. The taste of iron lingered on my tongue, not from the glass, but from the surge of triumph that followed. I straightened, slowly, painfully, savoring each moment as their world tilted. The evidence, recorded and untouched, would speak louder than words, and tonight the first strike of my revenge had landed. As Mark leaned close to check my pulse, I opened my eyes and whispered, "Got you." Their faces drained of color when they realized the old man wasn't so easy to kill. I rose slowly, letting every creak of the wooden floor announce my return to life. The room seemed to shrink around me, the low ceiling pressing, the burnt candle wax smell thick in the air, curling up my nostrils. My heart still pounded, but the tremor wasn't fear anymore. It was rage, distilled and sharp. Claire's eyes widened, frozen in that terrible space between relief and disbelief. "Dad," she whispered, voice barely carrying over the crackle of the dying fire in the hearth. I held up the tablet, letting the soft glow illuminate my grim face. The recordings of Robert and Mark spilled from the device like poison onto the walls. Every whispered plan, every casual admission, every cruel laugh, they couldn't hide it now. Not from me, not from her, not from anyone. Mark stumbled back, hands raised as though warding off the inevitable. You're bluffing!" he sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. His suit hung stiffly on his frame, too tight in the shoulders, trembling under the weight of panic. "I wish I were," I said, voice cracking with fury, each syllable sharpened by years of betrayal. "But it's all here. Every word. Every plot. Every lie you thought I wouldn't notice." Robert's sneer faltered, his usual arrogance crumbling into uncertainty. His lips pressed into a thin line, jaw tight, hands gripping the table edge until the knuckles turned white. This doesn't prove anything. He's old. Maybe he imagined it." I stepped closer, letting the tablet dangle between us, its light reflecting in Robert's widening eyes. "Imagined it? You called my grandson here to witness your plans. You poisoned my food, whispered about throwing me into a care home, mocked my memory. And now you wonder if it's real?" Claire clutched my arm, torn. "Dad, maybe we should." "No," I interrupted firmly, eyes locking onto hers. "Not yet. She needs to see it too. She deserves to know the truth about who they are." Mark's jaw tightened, his nostrils flaring. He paced, a nervous tic in the way he rubbed his temples repeatedly, muttering under his breath. This is impossible. He shouldn't have, he can't. You can't escape the truth," I said, letting the words roll off my tongue slowly, savoring their impact. My hand shook slightly, but the shaking was purposeful, a controlled tremor, like a storm gathering strength before breaking. The room seemed to pulse around us, the crackle of the fire, the low tick of the grandfather clock, and the faint hum of the old chandeliers swaying above. Every small noise felt amplified, every movement a drumbeat of reckoning. Claire's eyes darted between me and the two men she had trusted, seeing the cracks in their armor. Robert's carefully constructed confidence had dissolved into desperation, Mark's meticulous planning twisted into blind panic. "You wanted me out of the way," I continued, stepping closer to the table, letting my shadow fall across Robert's chest. "You thought the old man would break. You thought you could take everything. But you forgot." My voice softened just enough to make the words lethal. "You forgot that I am still here." I tapped the tablet. A whisper of Robert's voice filled the room. "The old man won't last a year." Mark's face turned ghostly pale. He staggered, almost tripping over a fallen chair. "No, that's not we." I raised my hand, cutting him off. "It's true. And you've admitted it all. Every single act, every betrayal. Tonight your lies have been exposed." Thomas, my grandson, stepped forward, small but resolute, holding the tablet tightly. His hands trembled, but his eyes shone with a bravery I had never seen before. "Grandpa, they did it. We have it all." Robert's breathing became erratic, chest rising and falling, the controlled menace replaced by something raw, animalistic. He looked at Mark, as if realizing for the first time that their careful plotting had been recorded, immortalized, and weaponized. Mark sank into a chair, head in hands, muttering curses. We should have, I ignored their faltering words. Instead, I focused on the room, the smell of burnt candle wax mixing with sweat, the sound of chairs scraping, the faint hum of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Everything, the fear, the adrenaline, the betrayal, was now mine to control. And then the moment of tension snapped like a wire. Robert lunged across the table, eyes blazing with murderous rage, knocking the chair backward. The room froze for an instant, the metallic scent of his anger almost tangible. I braced myself, letting every fiber of my being scream, "I am not the victim here." And then Robert lunged across the table, eyes blazing with murderous rage. Violence has a way of stripping people bare, revealing not strength, but desperation. Robert's lunge slammed into the edge of the table with a deafening crack. Wood splintered, plates toppled, and wine spilled across the floor like a dark river, soaking Mark's polished shoes. The room erupted in chaos. The metallic clatter of cutlery, Claire's horrified scream, the thundering of my own heartbeat filling the small space. I held my ground, leaning slightly back, letting the initial shock pass over me. My grandson's tablet glowed softly in the corner, recording every jagged motion, every syllable of truth. This was the evidence I needed, the confessions, the betrayal, the greed. Mark lunged after Robert, trying to restrain him, his own panic seeping into every stiff movement. His tailored suit, once a symbol of control, now looked ridiculous against the chaos, sleeves rolling as he clawed at Robert's shoulders. The scent of spilled wine mixed with Robert's sweat, a bitter perfume marking their unraveling. "You don't touch me!" Robert roared, striking blindly, and a shard of glass from the broken wine glass cut into his hand. Crimson bloomed instantly, painting his fingers, dripping onto the oak floor. He hissed in pain, then laughed, unhinged, shaking with fury. I stepped closer, voice low and steady, the trembling I felt inside only enhancing the performance. "It's over. All of it." My hands were raised, not to strike, but to show the calm control they lacked. Claire, frozen moments ago, finally found her voice. "Dad, you were right all along. They planned everything." Her words trembled, but the weight behind them made the room almost unbearably tense. Mark's eyes darted toward her, a mixture of guilt and desperation twisting his face. "Claire, don't listen to him. He's manipulating." Robert bared his teeth in a cruel grin, though it was tinged with panic now. "We were going to finish him tonight. Everything was ready." His voice cracked, a mixture of anger and fear. The confession echoed through the room, bouncing off walls heavy with the scent of smoke from burnt candles and the acrid tang of blood. My grandson, Thomas, remained at my side, small but resolute, eyes wide as he whispered, "Grandpa, it's all recorded. Every word." His grip on the tablet was firm despite his trembling hands. I let the moment stretch. Let them feel the weight of exposure, the unbearable gravity of their own words. Every breath they took was shallow, rapid, heavy with panic. Robert stumbled, blood dripping onto his tie, eyes flicking to the floor and back at me. You can't. I can. I interrupted, voice low but cold. And I will. The neighbor's doorbell rang, sharp and urgent, cutting through the room like a knife. Mark froze, realization dawning. The neighbor, they called, Claire whispered, voice barely audible. Thank God. Within minutes, the wail of sirens filled the street. The room's tension became tangible, a living thing curling around us. Robert and Mark tried to compose themselves, straightening jackets, wiping wine from their faces, but the panic never left their eyes. When the police arrived, they found a house caught in the throes of collapse, smashed chairs, shattered glass, wine-stained floors, the scent of copper from Robert's cut hand mingling with burnt candle wax. I stood steady, holding the tablet like a shield, my grandson by my side. Officers quickly separated the men. Mark attempted explanations, fumbling over words, sweat streaking his temples, but every movement betrayed his intent. Robert sputtered, the bloody cut on his hand a crimson exclamation point to his confession. I watched as their empire of lies crumbled, no grand speech necessary. Their own words did it. Every plan, every whispered scheme, every attempt to erase me now pinned them down in the harsh light of truth. Claire, tears streaming, approached. She hesitated, then hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have seen it sooner. I held her close, whispering into her hair. You saw it when it mattered. That's enough. The officers cuffed Robert first, his eyes flashing with unspent rage, the edge of fury still alive despite his bloodied state. Then Mark was taken, face pale, lips quivering as he realized his control had evaporated completely. As the handcuffs clicked around Mark's wrists, he leaned slightly toward me. His voice was barely audible, a hiss wrapped in menace. This isn't over. I stared at him, unflinching, feeling the finality of the moment settle in. His words, intended as a threat, were just echoes now. They had tried to destroy me, but it was their own undoing, and the recording, the truth, would ensure no corner remained dark enough to hide them. Outside, sirens wailed, neighbors gathered, and the world seemed to breathe around us for the first time in weeks. Chaos had stripped them bare, revealing the desperation beneath their carefully constructed facades. I could feel it, the cold, thrilling certainty that justice, however delayed, had arrived. Thomas looked up at me, face shining with awe and relief. We did it, Grandpa. You were right. I knelt, placing a hand on his shoulder, voice steady, eyes calm despite the adrenaline still thrumming through me. We did, but this is just the beginning. Always remember, truth, patience, and timing are our greatest weapons. But as the handcuffs clicked, Mark leaned toward me and whispered, this isn't over. Justice doesn't heal wounds, it only stitches them shut, leaving scars you'll never forget. The house felt unbearably quiet. Every step I took on the creaking wooden floorboards seemed louder than it should have been, echoing through empty rooms like a memory of what had been lost. Dust settled in soft layers across the old furniture, the faint smell of wood polish mingling with a lingering tang of burnt wine and blood, a ghost of the night everything fell apart. Claire's cries floated from the living room. I didn't rush. I knew her grief was part relief, part sorrow for the family we used to be. I could almost feel her guilt, her confusion about whom to forgive, what to feel, how to rebuild. Thomas clung to my hand, small but unyielding now, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and wariness. Grandpa, he whispered, voice trembling yet firm. Will they ever come back? I squeezed his hand, letting him feel the steady pulse of certainty I didn't entirely feel myself. No, I said. They're gone. But the memory, that never truly leaves. And that's why we stay alert. The bracelet rested on my nightstand, its gold gleaming faintly under the dim light. Mended, yes, but the faint crack remained, a quiet testament to betrayal, visible enough to remind me, subtle enough not to dominate. I picked it up, rolling it between my fingers, the weight of it grounding me. I walked past the empty chairs in the dining room. The table still bore faint scratches from that night of chaos, splintered edges, wine stains etched like scars into the surface. I paused, touching a deep gouge. Memories flared, Robert's rage, Mark's panic, Claire frozen in disbelief. And through it all, Thomas recording quietly, capturing the truth. I shivered at how close I had come to losing everything. The smell of old wood mixed with a faint trace of iron in the air, a lingering perfume of danger that never fully left. It made me inhale deeply, remembering the night, the chaos, the moment I had claimed control, even as everything seemed on the verge of collapse. Claire appeared behind me, silent, eyes red. I I can't stop thinking about it, she said, voice breaking. All the things I should have seen. All the lies I ignored. Her words faltered. I turned slowly, resting a hand on her shoulder. You saw it eventually. That's what matters. Truth is a scar, yes, but it also protects. Thomas tugged gently at my sleeve. Grandpa, can we watch it again? Just the recording? I hesitated, knowing each replay was a double-edged sword, proof of survival, proof of betrayal, proof that danger could strike again. Yet, it also reminded us we had prevailed. I nodded. We can. But just a little. Only enough to remember. The tablet glowed, Thomas's small fingers hesitating before pressing play. The room filled with echoes of their voices. Robert's confession, Mark's attempts at control, Claire's disbelief, my own steady assertion of truth. Every word, every gasp, every fragment of panic replayed, and yet, oddly, it brought a strange comfort. It was proof that we had survived, proof that lies could not hold indefinitely. The house felt larger now, emptier, and heavier with the memories. Each creak of floorboards, each distant echo of the street outside reminded me that life had shifted irrevocably. Innocence, safety, and trust had been chipped away. Thomas's grip on my hand was firmer now, an anchor against the world's unpredictability. Weeks passed like this, quiet mornings, the occasional sobs, the soft shuffle of our lives trying to resume a semblance of normalcy. And yet, the crack in the bracelet, the scratches on the table, the faint smell of iron in the air, they all told the same story. Survival was not clean, justice was not neat, and the scars we carried would never fully fade. Then one evening, as twilight spilled across the old wooden floors, I opened my mail. Bills, letters, routine correspondence, nothing unusual, until I found an envelope with no return address. My fingers hesitated over it, a chill crawling up my spine. I tore it open carefully, sensing, without wanting to, a familiar danger. Inside was a single piece of cake, small, neatly wrapped, nothing else. The faint smell of almond and sugar drifted toward me, but beneath it, I caught it, the faint, metallic tang of threat. Thomas peered over my shoulder, eyes wide. Grandpa, someone sent. I swallowed, the words caught in my throat. Slowly, deliberately, I held the cake in my hand, studying it. The quietness of the house seemed to press closer, the shadows deepening, as if they were listening with us. This was no accident, no innocent gesture. It was a message, a reminder. Justice may have stitched the wound shut, but the scars remained. And in that instant, I knew that the story wasn't over. Not yet. One evening, I opened my mail and found an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single piece of cake. Sometimes the deadliest threats don't come with shouts, they come in silence. The cake sat there, innocuous and cruel, on the corner of the table. Its pale surface gleamed under the soft lamplight, a mocking simplicity. The faint aroma of almonds drifted toward me, sweet but sharp, like a memory I wished I could forget. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Not yet. My fingers hovered above it, shaking slightly, and I felt Thomas staring at me, eyes wide, too knowing for a child. Beside it lay a letter. The paper was thick, expensive, and ominously familiar. The handwriting, marks, looped across the page with cold precision. You may have won this battle, old man, but the war isn't over. I felt a surge of fury, my chest tightening. The words were simple, yet the menace behind them was palpable. He had survived. He had plotted, and now he was toying with me, testing the patience I had painstakingly cultivated. The taste of iron crept into my mouth, not real blood, just memory, but vivid enough to remind me that nothing was ever clean, nothing fully over. Thomas shuffled closer, tiny fingers brushing mine. Grandpa, are they coming back? I knelt beside him, swallowing the rising panic and twisting it into resolve. They think they are, I said quietly, but we're ready this time. We've learned. And we fight on our terms. The house was eerily still. Dust motes floated in the lamplight like miniature specters. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching and twisting in shapes that could have been monsters, or memories. My own heartbeat seemed louder than it should have been, every thump a drumbeat of vigilance, every pause an invitation to fear. I picked up the letter, careful not to tear it, reading every word again. Mark referenced events that only I and the family could know. My son's accident, my daughter's secret late-night visits to the hospital, even the small betrayal of trust one had confided in him long ago. The precision of his words was personal, cruel, and deliberate, meant to unsettle, meant to remind me that he had studied us, learned our weaknesses, and was patient enough to wait. You think the past has been buried, but it's just the soil beneath which I grow my roots. Enjoy your brief comfort, old man. Soon the harvest will come, and I will be there when you least expect it. Sleep lightly. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand, goosebumps prickling under my skin. The message wasn't a threat shouted in rage. It was calm, deliberate, a serpent coiled around the edges of my life, waiting. The cake beside it, sweet and empty, was a symbol, a lure, a reminder, a silent warning. Thomas tugged at my sleeve again. Grandpa, can we hide it? I smiled faintly, brushing back his dark hair. We'll keep it safe, I said, and I meant it. Safe from them, safe from fear, safe from the moment when danger tried to knock us down. I set the letter and the cake inside a locked drawer. The click of the lock echoed, sharp and final. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier with the knowledge that though the battle was won, the war, the slow, simmering war of threats, shadows, and manipulation, had only just begun. I walked past the living room, pausing to glance at the recording on the tablet. Thomas had fallen asleep next to it, exhausted but comforted by proof of survival. I let my fingers brush the screen, the soft hum of electronics the only sound, and a thought struck me: revenge, once awakened, never sleeps. It moves quietly, deliberately, waiting for the perfect opening. I had learned that, and I was ready. The scent of almonds lingered, sweet and bitter, and I closed my eyes, breathing it in like a ritual of awareness. My mind replayed every step of the past weeks, the poisoning test, the staged collapse, the confrontation, the confession, the chaos, the silence afterward. Every moment had prepared me for this final act, to exist in vigilance, to be the predator now, not the prey. Hours passed, the clock ticking steadily. Midnight approached, a slow metronome marking the rhythm of dread. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood, the faint whistle of wind through a cracked window. I stood in the darkness, Thomas asleep, Claire finally resting after weeks of tears and guilt, and I felt the weight of their absence, the villains who had tried to take everything. And then, as the clock struck midnight, a sound cut through the quiet. It was faint, impossible to locate at first, a ripple in the darkness, a laugh, low and cruel. My breath caught. My eyes snapped to the shadows, muscles tensing, every nerve alert. It was unmistakable. Robert's laughter, echoing somewhere between memory and reality, haunting, taunting, a reminder that the story wasn't over. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Fear and rage collided, but beneath it, a new resolve: I would not fall quietly. The war had begun, and this time, I controlled the battlefield. And as the clock struck midnight, I swore I heard Robert's laughter echoing in the dark.